Hi guys, welcome to the channel of love and the journey of ascension. We're currently reading Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude by Napoleon Hill and W. Clement Stone. We're on part 2, chapter 7. Learn to see. When he was a boy, George W. Campbell was blind. Bilateral congenital cataracts, the doctor called it. George's father looked at the doctor, not wanting to believe. Isn't there anything you can do? Wouldn't an operation help? No, said the doctor. As of now, we know of no way to treat this condition. George Campbell couldn't see, but the love and faith of his parents made his life rich. As a very young boy, he did not know that he was missing anything. And then, when George was 6 years old, something happened which he wasn't able to understand. One afternoon, he was playing with another youngster. The other boy, forgetting that George was blind, tossed a ball to him. Look out, it'll hit you. The ball did hit George, and nothing in his life was quite the same after that. George was not hurt, but he was greatly puzzled. Later, he asked his mother, how could Bill know what's going to happen to me before I know it? His mother sighed, for now the moment she dreaded had arrived. Now it was necessary for her to tell her son for the first time, you are blind. And here is how she did it. Sit down, George, she said softly, as she reached over and took one of his hands. I may not be able to describe it to you, and you may not be able to understand, but let me try to explain it this way. And sympathetically, she took one of his little hands in hers and started counting his fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These fingers are similar to what is known as the 5 senses. She touched each finger between her thumb and index finger in sequence as she continued the explanation. This little finger for hearing, this little finger for touch, this little finger for smell, this one for taste. And then she hesitated before continuing. This little finger for sight, and each of the 5 senses, like each of the 5 fingers, sends messages to your brain. Then she closed the little finger, which she had named sight, and tied it so that it would stay next to the palm of George's hand. George, you are different from other boys, she explained, because you have the use of only 4 senses, like 4 fingers, 1 hearing, 2 touch, 3 smell, and 4 taste, but you don't have the use of your sense of sight. Now, I want to show you something. Stand up, she said gently. George stood up. His mother picked up his ball. Now hold out your hand, as if you were going to catch this, she said. George held out his hands, and in a moment he felt the hard ball hit his fingers. He closed them tightly around it and caught it. Fine, fine, said his mother. I never want you to forget what you have just done. You can catch a ball with 4 fingers instead of 5, George. You can also catch and hold a full and happy life with 4 senses instead of 5 if you get in there and keep trying. Now, George's mother had used a metaphor, and such a simple figure of speech is one of the quickest and most effective methods of communicating ideas between persons. George never forgot the symbol of 4 fingers instead of 5. It meant to him the symbol of hope. And whenever he became discouraged because of his handicap, he used the symbol as a self-motivator. It became a form of self-suggestion to him, for he would repeat 4 fingers instead of 5 frequently. At times of need, it would flash from his subconscious to his conscious mind. And he found that his mother was right. He was able to catch a full life and hold it with the use of the 4 senses which he did have. But George Campbell's story doesn't end here. In the middle of his junior year at high school, the boy became ill, and it was necessary for him to go to the hospital. While George was convalescing, his father brought him information from which he learned that science had developed a cure for congenital cataracts. Of course, there was a chance of failure, but the chances for success far outweighed those for failure. George wanted so much to see that he was willing to risk failure in order to see. During the next 6 months, 4 delicate surgical operations were performed, 2 on each eye. For days, George lay in the darkened hospital room with bandages over his eyes. And finally, the day came for the bandages to be removed. Slowly, carefully, the doctor unwound the gauze from around George's head and over his eyes. There was only a blur of light. George Campbell was still technically blind. For one awful moment, he lay thinking, and then he heard the doctor move him beside his bed. Something was being placed over his eyes. "Now, can you see?" came the doctor's question. George raised his head slightly from the pillow. The blur of light became colour. The colour, a form, a figure. "George," a voice said. He recognised the voice. It was his mother's voice. For the first time in his 18 years of life, George Campbell was seeing his mother. There were the tired eyes, the wrinkled 62-year-old face, and the knotted and gnarled hands. But to George, she was most beautiful. To him, she was an angel. The years of toil and patience, the years of teaching and planning, the years of being his seeing eyes, the love and affection, that was what George saw. To this day, he treasures his first visual picture, the sight of his mother, and as you will see, he learned an appreciation for his sense of sight from this experience. None of us can understand, he says, the miracle of sight unless we have had to do without it. Seeing is a learned process, but George also learns something that is very helpful to anyone interested in the study of PMA. He will never forget the day he saw his mother standing before him in the hospital room and did not know who she was or even what she was until he heard her speak. What we see, George points out, is always an interpretation of the mind. We have to train the mind to interpret what we see. This observation is backed up by science. Most of the process of seeing is not done by the eyes at all, says Dr. Samuel Renshaw in describing the mental process of seeing. The eyes act as hands which reach out there and grab meaningless things and bring them into the brain. The brain then turns the things over to the memory. It is not until the brain interprets in terms of comparative action that we really see anything. Some of us go through life seeing very little of the power and the glory around us. We do not properly filter the information that our eyes give us through the mental processes of the brain. As a result, we often behold things without really seeing them at all. We receive physical impressions without grasping their meaning to us. We do not, in other words, put PMA to work on the impressions that are sent to our brain. Is it time to have your mental vision checked? Not your physical vision, that is a matter for the medical specialist, but mental vision, like physical vision, can become distorted. When it does, you can grope in a haze of false concepts, bumping and hurting yourself and others unnecessarily. The most common physical weaknesses of the eye are two opposite extremes: nearsightedness and farsightedness. These are the major distortions of mental vision too. The person who is mentally nearsighted is apt to overlook objects and possibilities that are distant. He pays attention only to the problems immediately at hand and is blind to the opportunities that could be his by thinking and planning in terms of the future. You are nearsighted if you do not make plans, form objectives, and lay the foundation for the future. On the other hand, the mentally far-sighted person is apt to overlook possibilities that are right before him. He does not see the opportunities at hand. He sees only a dream world of the future, unrelated to the present. He wants to start at the top rather than move up step by step, and he does not recognise that the only job where you can start at the top is the job of digging a hole. They looked and recognised what they saw. So, in the process of learning to see, you will want to develop both your near sight and your far sight. The advantages to the man who knows how to see what is directly in front of him are enormous. For years, the people in the little town of Darby, Montana, used to look up at what they called Crystal Mountain. The mountain was given this name because erosion had exposed a ledge of a lightly sparkling crystal that looked something like rock salt. A pack trail was built directly across the outcropping as early as 1937, but it wasn't until the year 1951, 14 years later, that anyone bothered to stoop down, pick up a piece of the sparkling material and really look at it. It was in this year, 1951, that two Derby men, Mr. A.E. Cumley and Mr. L.I. Thompson, saw a mineral collection displayed in the town. Thompson and Cumley became very excited. There, in the mineral display, were specimens of beryl, which, according to the attached card, was used in atomic energy research. Immediately, Thompson and Cumley staked claims on Crystal Mountain. Thompson sent a specimen of the ore to the Borough of Mines office in Spokane, together with a request to send an examiner to see a very large deposit of the mineral. Later that year, the Bureau of Mines sent a bulldozer up the mountain and scraped off enough of the outcropping to determine that here indeed was one of the world's greatest deposits of extremely valuable beryllium. Today, heavy earth-moving trucks struggle up the mountain and work their way back down again, weighted down with the extremely heavy ore, while at the bottom, virtually waiting with dollar bills in their hands, are representatives of the United States Steel Company and the United States government, each anxious to buy the highly valued ore. All because one day 2 young men not only observed with their eyes, but took the trouble to see with their minds. Today, these men are well on their way to being multi-millionaires. A mentally far-sighted person could not have done what Thompson and Cumley did if his mental vision were distorted. For he is the man who can see only far-off values, while the advantages that lie at his feet go unclaimed. Are there fortunes right at your doorstep? Look about you. As you go about your daily chores, are there small areas of irritation? Perhaps you can think of a way to overcome them, a way that will be helpful not only to yourself, but to others. Many a man has made a fortune by meeting such homely needs. This was so of the man who invented the bobby pin and the one who devised the paperclip. It was so of the man who invented the zipper and the metal pants fastener. Look about you. Learn to see. You may find acres of diamonds in your own backyard. But mental nearsightedness can be just as much of a problem as mental farsightedness. The man with this problem sees only what is under his nose, while more distant possibilities go unclaimed. He is the man who does not understand the power of a plan. He does not understand the value of thinking time. He is so busy with the problems that immediately confront him that he does not free his mind to range into the distance, reaching for new opportunities, seeking trends, getting the big picture. Being able to see into the future is one of the most spectacular accomplishments of the human brain. Down in the heart of the Citrus Belt in Florida, there is a little town called Winter Haven. The surrounding country is farmland. Certainly, it will be considered by most people as an area entirely unsuited for a large tourist attraction. It is isolated. It has no beach, no mountains, only mile after mile of gently rolling hills with little lakes and cypress swamps down in the valleys. But to this region came a man who saw these cypress swamps with an eye that others had not used. His name was Richard Pope. Dick Pope bought one of these old cypress swamps, put a fence around it, and has turned down offers of at least $1 million for the world famous Cypress Gardens. Of course, it really wasn't as simple as that. All along the line, Dick Pope had to see opportunities in his situation. For instance, there was the question of advertising. Pope knew that the only way he would be able to draw the public into such an isolated place was through a barrage of advertising. But ads cost money. So what Dick Pope did was quite simple. He went into the popular photography business. He set up a photo supply house at Cypress Garden, sold his visitors film, and then taught them how to take spectacular shots of the garden. He hired skilled water skiers. He put them through intricate performances while over a loudspeaker he announced to the public exactly what camera settings they should use in order to catch the action. And then, of course, when these travellers went back home, the very best trip pictures were always of Cypress Gardens. They gave Dick Pope the very best kind of advertising there is, word of mouth recommendations with pictures. This is the kind of creative seeing that we all need to develop. We need to learn how to look at our world with fresh eyes, seeing the opportunities that lie all about us, but simultaneously looking into the future for the chances that are there. Seeing is a learned skill, but like any skill, it must be exercised. See another person's abilities, capacities, and viewpoint. We may think we recognise our own talents, yet in this respect, we may be blind. Let's illustrate with an example of a teacher who needed to have her mental vision checked. She was both nearsighted and farsighted, for she could not see either the present or the future potential abilities and capabilities of her students or their points of view. We will pick up with that story next time. Until then, take care, much love, bye for now.